Oh, hello, Alex. Welcome to the podcast. How are you, my friend?
I am doing well, Avish. Thanks for having me. How you doing?
Absolutely. I was sort of cheekily earlier thinking, oh, I'm gonna tell Alex that, oh, you are the friend I've known the longest who I'm having on this podcast. But then I realized, oh no, I had I don't know how well you know him, but Dan Nessel, who was from our college as well, who I met a couple years before you. But you are one of the oldest friends I have on this, so.
I will consider that an honor, but not that much of an honor, apparently. So,
And since we have known each other for so long, I am familiar with your resume, your vast work experience, all the company. I know every company you've worked for, because you are, as I mentioned before the we started recording, you're like this unicorn in the modern work world, in that you got a job out of college with ExxonMobil. Was it just Exxon when you got the job there?
yeah, it was actually mobile. I got there 3 months before they announced the merger.
Yeah,
So,
okay. So you were mobile, became ExxonMobil, and you are still there. What, 26 years later?
yep, this year will be 27. Absolutely.
Wow. Did you
It's
get a
sort of
did you
not.
get a special pin at your 25th anniversary?
No, actually, I got the 20-year pin. Now
Oh,
my
you got a
next
20-year
one's
pin.
30-year pin. So, yeah, that's it. That's it.
That's fantastic. Well, before we get into kind of why I invited you on here and want to talk to you about, um, could you give us like just a 1 minute overview, a little bit about kind of what you do and kind of, I mean, you got so many different jobs. I wrote down all of your job titles. You got a lot of different ones, but just kind of the very, very brief kind of synopsis of your journey and kind of where you are now.
Yeah, no, I'm probably one of the most boring guests you've had on the podcast. So yeah, but I've worked for one company since I started. In the 27 years, I think I counted, I've had about 14, 15 roles with the
Hmm.
company. I'm an engineer by background, so I started as a technical guy, and my first few years in the company was all about doing more technical stuff. But I moved into leadership roles, and really, the last 15 or so years, I've been moving across, and I went from being somebody who was a technical expert, and I am trying to at least be somebody who's more of a leadership expert person. So I've done a lot of things in a lot of different leadership positions all across the world, mostly in the US, but I spent some time in China as well. And really had a lot of great experiences meeting folks and learning a lot from them and leveraging my leadership skills and knowledge to try to get the best out of folks.
Yeah, which is great. And you sort of, humbly said, just trying to be a leader. But your current title, if LinkedIn is to be believed, is, and looking at some of those, you were a technology portfolio manager, which actually, frankly, that sounds less impressive than your earlier titles. Because you have the word global in four of your previous titles. So you were the global technology manager, the global sales manager, which is interesting, right? And so first, I'm just saying that to build you up a little bit. Like you've really led at a high level. If you've been at a place for 27 years, you're going to move up the ladder. But and I think this is interesting when we're talking about change. And I think you told me this probably 20 some odd years ago when you first started to get transferred around. Is that sort of the ExxonMobil philosophy, right? Is they intentionally move you around every, like, this wasn't you job hopping or internal. This was like they want to move you around every couple of years.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. I've never chosen my next job. Actually, I did once. I asked for one job and I got it. In fact, I've specifically asked to not go into jobs that I ended up getting. But the whole concept is, and the change element is absolutely one of them. But the whole concept is, as we progress in the company, either as a technical person or me as a management person, the goal is we need to see the breadth of the company. We need
Hmm.
to see everything from, I mean, ExxonMobil, a lot of people know us because of fuel, but we are leaders in chemicals. We're leaders in low carbon solutions at this point. And so the goal is, in order to capture value, in order to be able to lead an organization, we need to see as much as possible. And adaptability is absolutely core of being able to be successful as you move across roles, but even within a given role. So part of the reason we move around as much as we do is to actually get good at being adaptable. Adaptability is not something you, at least most of us, I certainly didn't
Hmm.
come prepared and are good at to start with. You get there after actually experience it, screwing up a few times and how you adapt, and then eventually getting really good at it.
Yeah, it's so this is a bit of a tangent, but that's kind of how we go in these conversations. Is there's this book I read recently called The Art of Impossible by Stephen Kotler. It's all about how to peak performance, how to get in the flow state. And there's a whole section on creativity, and what he recommends is if you want to kind of build your creative muscle, he said read for 25 minutes a day outside of your discipline. Just it doesn't matter what, just not like target like I want to be a better leader, so let me read it. Like literally anything you're curious about, because that breadth of knowledge actually makes you better at your core thing because it's those like sort of serendipitous connections that other people don't see. And I would assume that, you bouncing around so many like technical leadership, sales, facilities, like you've been all over the place, but then you could probably pull in areas from areas that wouldn't be so obvious.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect example. I do that. Honestly, that's where I feel I end up adding the most amount of value in the roles that I go into. It's when I have team members who are struggling in an area, I know where else in the company or even outside the company because of the external relationships I've developed over the years, I can connect them to. We have situations where we might be using one technology in one of our business areas, and that technology suddenly I realize, you know what? If we adapt it into the area I'm in now, it actually is a huge either cost saver or an opportunity to create a new product. Yeah, sure, there's adaptations that are needed, but the ability to connect those dots and have that broad of an impact is one of the things I've gotten out of the experiences I've had.
Mm-hmm. And so that's sort of the ExxonMobil philosophy is to bounce you around. And I don't know how many conversations like this you've had with people outside of ExxonMobil, but do you see this being applicable to someone who's in a company that doesn't intentionally do this? Like how could a normie, let's say, deal with this?
Yeah,
Like
no,
create that similar sort of serendipity.
yeah, I mean, whether it's I mean, it doesn't have to be a normie. I mean, I've been in my current role for like 3.5 years, right?
Mm,
At a certain point, you do need to balance what you know well and continue to figure out, well, how do I create new abilities to connect the dots? I'll give you the same advice I would give folks that join my team. And it honestly, it all starts with people. Right, it's the reality is most of the stuff I've learned, I haven't read,
mm,
or I haven't just read. I've talked to somebody about it, and they've helped me understand more. So what I tell my folks for individuals who are going to be a little more focused in an area, it's first of all figure out the connections, either through your own linkages or leveraging your contacts, your colleagues, your supervisor, who may have knowledge in areas that are nearby and that could be valuable. So the benefit of that is twofold. One, you're going to learn more in an area outside of where you are. And two, you're going to figure out how you can bring that in and support your own activity.
mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that I often tell folks is no matter how much you love your job, it's still a job. And doing work that is only assigned to you, and this is what would happen in a corporation, is good. But think about what are the areas you're going to enjoy working that wouldn't come natural, and find a way to engage. Luckily, in a big company, you usually can leverage people to help make those connections. Many cases, I've had folks on my team that have an area. I mean, in my organization, we work in a lot of technologies that we're looking basically medium term in terms of profitability, and they want to work on something that might be 20 years away. And I link them into the parts of our organization where they can be involved in the brainstorming or the idea generation associated with that. And the value is like huge, right? Because one, it continues to expand what they're thinking about. They get more enjoyment out of it, and they also bring ideas back. And no matter
Mm-hmm.
how disparate of an area, I have rarely found an opportunity where somebody isn't bringing something back that adds to the team they're on today.
So is this sort of like the whole Google like 20% time where they get like a set of like you encourage people to do stuff that's outside of their primary job function?
Not always. I will say these days, I mean, the fact is everybody's looking to be efficient. But yes, it's to do things really more that they are going to get enjoyment on. That's a little outside of their focus area. It doesn't mean that I have somebody who's in technology and I say go on a sales trip for a few days. It's more about I try to understand what they're interested in,
Hmm.
and it's a conversation I'll have with folks. Sometimes during the year, they're so busy on their core activities, it's hard to find that time, but it's something we look to connect to link to some development plan or and actually not or and an area of interest for them.
Well, and is the key word there. So, speaking of which, let's make this conversation about me a little bit. Because what you're talking about there, it's this thing depending on the time and the topic of the keynote, I talk about in my keynote, and I kind of want to get your thoughts on this because it sounds similar to what you're saying. So I say the entree into it is I talk about how to avoid burnout to get yourself more engaged, or if you got a place I get them more engaged, is saying yes and to yourself. And I say one of the best ways to do that is to set what I call an impossible goal, which is a goal you don't know yet how to achieve, but then you set the goal and you figure out how to do it. But it has to be a goal you care about. It can't be a strategically sound goal or like I should do this, but something you're like, I would love to do that, but I don't know how. So, but instead, because then you start engaging your creativity, you learn, you test stuff, and you play. So it sounds similar. Well, let me ask you: is that kind of similar to what you're talking about? Is that along the lines of what you're saying? Like, go figure something out. You don't know how to do it, but go learn and try because that's going to get you pumped and excited and energized.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, so actually that element resonates in a couple of ways. One is the concept of figuring something out is I view that more as how do I get somebody additionally motivated and have all those side benefits associated with it, right? I'm a big proponent of understanding people's motivations
Hmm.
because my view is people do better when they enjoy what they're doing. So if you can figure out what motivates them to enjoy it, you then find opportunities to them to work on it.
And it's
Your element,
shocking that that is like a profound statement. Like,
it
duh, but
shouldn't be.
it's like just not. It's so you go out in the world. It's just people seem to forget that.
No, I mean, right? So the concept of work, allowing work to be fun at not always, right? Like, listen, all of us at times are miserable at work.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but the reality is, we all have such a great opportunity to find ways to have some fun at work, either in terms of the camaraderie or what we do, that it's scary how we don't take advantage of that as much as we do. So when I was chatting about trying to find where people are motivated and have fun, that is something I view as a little different from what your comment was, which I think is fantastic. This concept of setting impossible goals. Actually, we like the term I use are bold, and the term we actually have used across ExxonMobil is the concept of bold goals.
Hmm.
And actually, the value, and I love your concept, is the reason you set them is because you don't know how to get at them. In fact, we do that a lot in some of our like big next generation projects that we look at, where we basically say, and I could talk specifics, but I'm sure your audience won't care specifics about chemicals projects or refining
You'd be
projects.
surprised.
But the reality is, we look at a technology that normally would take 10 years to develop.
Hmm.
And there's one way of going about and saying, hey, do it in 9 years. Okay. If you set 9 years as a goal, you'll probably get there. People will find a way to cut 10% off of a project. They usually sandbag it to start with, just so that they can say they cut 10% off at the end. Right. So, but the key is if you don't tell them to do it in 9 years, you tell them to do it in 5.
Hmm.
Impossible, right? It's going to force different thinking. It's going to force them to go talk to people they never would have thought about talking. It's going to force them to research outside and say, who was able to do something even close to this in 5 years? And the big thing is, even at the end, if they don't do it in 5 years, it's okay. Because if they do it in 6, they didn't meet the goal, but they did it better than anyone else in the world would have been able to do it. And
Yeah.
so it sets this amazing objective that has to be semi realistic, but has to also drive them to do it completely differently. And then at the back end, knowing that, you know what, if even if you don't hit that 5 years and you hit 6, you better still give yourself a pat on the back, because remember where you started. It was 10.
Yeah. And this might be different for, corporate versus like solopreneur individual.
Yep.
I find that if you don't hit the goal at all, the setting of the goal and the attempting to achieve it will often open up new doors that you would not have seen if you didn't go after the goal, and you'll have developed skills that you would not have either. So sometimes you don't even achieve the goal, but wow, now, oh my God, now this whole new path I never even conceived of is open to me.
Yes. Although I will say, in a corporate level, so we've done this. We've been pretty good about trying to encourage broader folks to do this appropriately. If you do it too much, you lose all credibility. Could you imagine if your boss, every time you came in and said, "Hey, I'm going to take a week to do this," they said, "Well, I want it in a day." And it wasn't just on the important things, but they said it
Yes.
on everything.
Yeah,
Suddenly, you're going to hate your boss. You're going to never expect that they're going to give you a realistic timing on anything that they do. So
correct.
it does have to be targeted. It has to be on the biggest things. If you
Yeah,
do
it's
it
the
on
big goal. In fact,
everything,
I do say that I'm like, you can't apply this to everything because that's how you get burnt out, right? But like one thing, like the thing that matters, that's where you really put that effort in. So,
yes.
uh, oh, that
It's
is
like what,
awesome. And so why? I mean, I don't know how much outside or how much you've thought about this, but is this something that you've sort of, and I kind of know the answer since I've known you for 30 years, but is this sort of how your attitude has always been? Because it seems, from a managerial standpoint, that flexibility, that freedom to let people maybe be a little bit less efficient in their primary function so they can explore and create and set goals that maybe they won't achieve. It seems to not be as common as a trait in managers, because of metrics and KPIs and things like that. So is this something you've always sort of is this the way you've always operated, or do you have to kind of learn it? And how did that develop?
well, first, let me start by saying that just because I say it's what I try to do doesn't mean I'm actually fantastic at doing it all the time. I mean, the reality is of whether you're on your own and you're focused on an element that seems to be taking all your time, or if you're in a big company and you have a bunch of projects and deadlines, it is really hard to maintain it over time. So it's an item that I can't say that I do perfectly across the entire team or across my entire organization. I don't.
Hmm.
Um, but I mean, the concept of thinking about how to leverage people's motivations is something I've learned over time, and actually I've learned it because of myself. So a lot of these things you sort of experience firsthand, and then you figure out, all right, when I finally get into a leadership position, I'm going to start figuring out how to try to apply it with my team. And the reality is, I haven't always liked my job. I've been here for 27 years.
Hmm.
At year 5, I had a resignation letter ready to hand in to somebody, and then last minute chose not to do it with additional information. But part of it was because I didn't like what I was doing. And then eventually when I started thinking about why I didn't like what I was doing, it wasn't just because I was assigned things I wasn't enjoying. I
Hmm.
hadn't spoken up. I hadn't told the people I was working for, hey, you know what? I really don't enjoy pure research. I would much rather engage with customers more frequently.
Hmm.
I would much rather talk to people about how to do things externally to ExxonMobil. And I sort of just swallowed it, and I assumed the only change I could get would be to leave.
Wow.
And so when the reality crept on me, and actually the reason I didn't resign is somebody came to me and told me I was moving roles within the company. It was the third time I had moved positions in the company. I was in my 20s at the same time, right? You mature, you get older,
Hmm.
you learn some of these concepts. And then two things crept out. One is the power of giving people the opportunity to influence what they work on and understanding what motivates them. so that when even they can't tell you what motivates, what they enjoy working on, by understanding their motivations, you can give them projects or engagements that get them involved. And number two is my ability to control my own destiny no matter where I am. We often underestimate how much we can control, and we think others control everything for us.
Hmm.
So that's where it came from.
Oh, that's great. And I did not, I mean, I forget where you were living at that point. Was that when you were living in Philly with us or?
Yeah, I was when I was. We were all living in Chestnut Hill together.
Wow, I did not, I obviously were
Yeah,
hanging out a lot back then. I did not know you
you
were close to resigning.
you did not, but you maybe you remember I had started a night program going to get my master's, still in engineering. I'd
Mhm.
gone to and but yeah, so it was right at the back end of that. Maybe we had moved away from Chestnut Hill, but I had started thinking about it even before.
Wow. That's all.
Yeah.
It is such a great lesson though of, because I've been there before where you're just in a situation and you assume this is the way it is. But just by sort of communicating and having that conversation, I mean, you might be told no, uh,
Mhm.
but you never know. And so at least having that conversation and being, can really, it's amazing how many problems good communication can sort of stave off.
Yes. No, absolutely. Good communication. And even if you're told no by your supervisor, nothing stops you from engaging, walking around the halls, talking to people, figuring out what they're working on. And yes, it's a personal commitment. But if you find a project that you'd like to get involved with and talk to them about, you can take a few hours a week. Yeah, you may have to work longer, but if that's what motivates you, the ability to control what ends up happening is bigger than your boss. It's even bigger than the company in most cases. We have a lot more control than we generally think about. So yeah, that's a mentality that I've never like. It's something that I've kept evolving.
Hmm.
It hasn't always been my mindset, and even after I got it, I would sometimes dip down. But it's a super empowering mindset to have.
Yeah, and I think it's the one thing that I talk about, and this was I learned early on in my improv comedy days, is what you can control is your one next step. Like, and after that, who knows what's going to happen? So I think in your situation, or what you're talking about, I think people would not necessarily do that because they would try to play out the whole reel in their mind. Like, well, if I go down the hall and talk to these people, and then what if they say yeah, and then what if I got to go talk to my boss about it, and so they freeze and like, I can't take the first step until I know how everything's going to play out. Versus, all you can really do is control your one next step, but you have total control over that. So just go
Yep.
and have that conversation. Like, who knows where it's going to lead, and you can always back off of it. But it's amazing how just being willing to take those little tiny steps can lead to somewhere amazing.
Yeah, well, I figured that's sort of how you got into this gig, right? You started with your own improv group after doing it in college. Did you envision this is where you were going to end up at
No,
the
I had no idea. In fact, and I don't share this, not that it's a secret, but it's just not something that really comes up. But you were there without knowing it when I kind of decided that this might be something I'd want to do. Because I was doing improv and it was great. And then I went to a Tony Robbins seminar. Uh, while for those who don't know, Alex, you graduated 2 years after me. I think you graduated in 97.
Yeah, actually three, I guess, 98. That's
Okay, yeah,
right.
so I was 95, you graduated in 98. So yeah, I was living in an apartment with my buddy Mike, and you moved into the same apartment complex without telling us. You just showed up one day.
I did.
And we're like, what are you doing? You're like, I live here now. It was like a sitcom. Uh and like, oh, and then like a year later, like went to this Tony. I'd been reading Tony's stuff and whatnot, so I went to a seminar, and whatever. It was good for what it was. I've kind of softened on my uh, interest in that sort of thing. But the key for me there was watching him do his thing. I was like, oh, he's just basically performing. But he's also teaching, and that's the two things I liked. I love performing, but I also love teaching, like karate, and it was like that moment I came back from the seminar, and like you guys were sitting there like on our porch, and we went out for drinks. But that was like the moment that not when I decided I'd be a speaker, but that's kind of what put that inkling. So to your point, no, the first four, whatever, 3 years of doing this, I had no idea, and even for years after that, like it wasn't until I decided it was time to move on. But yeah, had I not taken that first step of like, well, let me let me just start this improv group. And at the time, that was my dream. And then it sort of shifted. And it's just, well, let's talk about that change and stuff a little bit. Cause, obviously you said that, one of the things that helped you stay there was you got a new position and you've had what, like 8 or 10 roles over 27 years.
Yep.
So every one of those is a pretty big change. Number one is a change for you. You were often moving, not just job functions, but locations, your family,
Hmm.
countries sometimes. So it was a big change for you, but it was, I'm assuming, especially in the later years, it was a big change for the teams you got transferred into because you would be transferred into them as the new leader, right? Um,
Absolutely.
and so this is something I like to work with groups on and talk about. Like how do you reduce that friction that comes along with change, whether it's a new leader or new technology or a new, hey, we're rolling out corporate values or
Yep.
new CRM, like whatever the thing is, or oh, now we or rules, regulations, laws, right? Like oh, here's new environmental protections, so we got to change this way we were doing things. So how have you found ways to sort of reduce the friction of change, both for yourself when you go someplace, but also with the people you're now going to be leading and working with?
Yeah. So I mean, there's a couple things that have helped both at the same time. The benefit of changing roles, and particularly changing roles into areas you have very little experience on, is, I mean, I don't even have to pretend I'm dumb. I'm literally dumb in that area. So it's fantastic. And the value of that is you go in asking questions because you can't go in with the answers. You don't have the answers.
Mm-hmm.
And so suddenly you ask these questions, and folks appreciate that they are being able and are able to provide you their opinion and their leverage their huge experience. Because the thing about a company that moves certain people is there's another subset of people who they've chosen to want to develop expertise in subject areas or in technologies, and they become more pillars to be able to support the new leaders that are coming in. So I spend my mantra in every move is honestly for the first 3 months, I focus almost exclusively on the people and almost zero on the actual area I'm running. It's
Hmm.
probably an over simplicity of it, but I spend all my time with the people for two reasons. One, listening to them, understanding what they know, understanding what's going well. I always start with what's going well,
Mm-hmm.
because if I break any of that, then even if the area needed fixing, if I already break the little few things that are going well, then there's not going to be anything to fix on the back end. And then
Mm-hmm.
of course understanding what they want to resolve. And I also have a second rule, which is not always popular, but is I trust is critical in doing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my going in position always is I give trust initially to my people. And yeah, would I trust them with my life immediately? No, but I trust them with pretty significant things.
Mm-hmm.
And only if they prove that I can't trust them do I take that trust away. I'll do some verification, but I don't require that they prove that I should trust them on day one. I give it to them first with the expectation that not all of them, but that helps them then give me their trust earlier than later.
I love that idea. And I think that's the way it's funny in my own terms, and I haven't really talked about this in a while, but maybe after this conversation, I'll work it back into my programs. But I say, most people they like they say yes, but, and then they want you to prove to me that I should say yes and to you. Whereas I'm like, why don't you go in and say yes and then prove to me that like I can't trust you? It's like the exact same thing. And I think what I thought it was a lot of it comes down to sort of this idea you had about you can control more than you think. And I think the reason we don't, a new leader or even an old leader doesn't trust is because that fear of losing control. Like, well, what if this person doesn't do something? And then, but if you're like, well, I'm going to trust them. And you know what? If they screw up, like, well, I'll figure it out. Like, we'll respond and then we'll still deal with it. But have you, I mean, you don't have to go into specifics or maybe you don't want to, but like, have you gotten burnt on that? Like, have you trusted people and been like, oh, they totally screwed that up. And now we got to scramble to fix it?
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about going into a role is you're generally taking over from somebody who isn't totally incompetent, even if it's somebody taking over from me. So things are generally going okay. I will say, I have never gotten totally burned.
Hmm.
Um, I've had people mess up presentations. I've had people mess up materials. I've had people give incorrect answers in places. But I mean, maybe I have a high threshold of what totally burned means. But the worst that has happened in those situations is fine, my boss is upset, or we were a little delayed in a project. That's all fixable. I mean, the one area I had one job in the company where I was responsible for operating and safety.
Hmm.
There, I didn't trust fully first. That's the only job I've had in my 27 years with the company where if somebody did something that could kill somebody, then there was a lot more verification ahead of that
Right. And
trust.
that, but that's the old phrase, right? You still trusted, but it's like trust but verify, right? Like you,
Well, it was verify and trust at the same time. But in any other role I've had, it has been the trust first, verify after.
yeah, which I think brings up a whole interesting subtopic of kind of risk mitigation and really understanding what real risk is, because if you get into like evolution in the mind and like the amygdala and the fear response, it's like, yeah, it was trained to be afraid of like mortal danger, like a saber-tooth tiger attacking you. But the world has evolved faster than the brain, so now we have the same fear response, but it's to like, oh, Joan in accounting being mad at us. Like it's crazy, like, but understanding the, like you said, that risk, like, yeah, safety, okay, that's a real,
It's a real thing.
you got
Yep.
to be a little bit more careful with that. But at the end of the day, with the other stuff, like, because it's risk reward, right? By taking that slight risk, knowing that, hey, at the end of the day, it's not a big deal, the rewards are better trust, faster rapport, better performance, all that. So the rewards are much higher, but so many people only focus on the risk. I'm like, oh God, what if they mess up?
Yeah, well, that's a huge element of cognitive science, right? We, in terms of value, and I'm going to screw up the number, so I'm not even going to try it. We tend to overestimate the downside of the risk versus the upside of the reward. We
Mm-hmm.
either we just because most of the time the risk is a personal risk. It affects us immediately and significantly,
Mm-hmm.
whereas the reward, unless it's money directly in your pocket, it doesn't feel as significant or concrete. If it's a job
Yes.
well done, okay, you move on.
That's a good point. And some we take our own success for granted, or it's kind of like you said about the if you set the a 10-year goal and make it 5 years and you get it done in 6 years, like you got to remind people to pat themselves on the back because they'll focus on the downside, like, oh, we didn't hit the 5-year goal, and
Mm-hmm.
it is interesting. But I think being aware of that, people can maybe like mitigate that a little bit. I mean, it's easier said than done, right? Because we're emotional creatures.
It is. We generally focus on the things we could do better rather than the things that we do well. Um,
Yeah, and
right?
that's me.
That's all of us. Heck, I do that even. Well, I remind myself. I keep fixing myself. So I part of what I do for fun is I cook, and
Uh-huh.
I'm in the midst now of trying something for a fourth time, of a sweet that I had in Europe that one of our friends, who I'm going to see tomorrow, loves.
Hmm.
But it doesn't store well. It's called a Couberdon. It's just this. It's a sugary sweet. So
Hmm.
I've made it four times. This is my fourth. The first three times, it all was in the wrong state of matter. It's supposed to be solid on the outside, and it was liquid and poured out of everything. Well, my fourth attempt is curing right now, and it's actually a little solid on the outside.
Oh, there you go.
So I'm already calling it a success. I don't care if it tastes like crap. It's already a success because I already did better than I did last time.
Yeah, and that's the iterative approach. Like it's the same kind of thing. It's just, oh, it's so good but so hard. Well, let's talk about that innovation a little bit then, and kind of the risk reward because I think the other thing is time frames. And we had talked a little bit before we got on the recording about investing and where do you put your time and your effort and your energy. And this is something you're involved in, and it's something that corporations deal with, but I think individuals too. Like, do you put your attention? I mean, this is like the Eisenhower matrix, right? Do you put your on the urgent or the important? or the urgent and important versus the important but not urgent. And this is something you balance or have to balance, like you and the whole organization. So, I mean, uh, why don't you share a little kind of what we're talking about and what your thoughts are on how you manage that?
No, absolutely. So, I mean, I'm my current role, and actually, I screwed that up when I introduced myself. I didn't even tell you all what I didn't tell you what I was currently doing. My current role is a technology director for, and I actually am involved with supporting three of our businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so one of the things that in technology that we look at is all of our businesses have products we sell today, but we also intend they're the ones I'm in charge of our chemicals businesses. And so the intent is we want them to be around and actually doing better in 20 years than they're doing today. But every year, actually every day, but we plan once a year. We have to make decisions of how much do we spend on technology efforts that will allow us to sell a little more product tomorrow versus technology efforts that will allow us to create a brand new product in 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And like there's really easy guardrails, right? So the first thing we think about, but it's still a hard choice to make because if you focus all your money, you'll make a ton of money tomorrow in the next week and year if you put all your money on that short-term stuff. But in 20 years, we're not going to have a business because without creating new products, reducing the cost of our existing ones, our customers will go to competition. We'll
Mm-hmm.
get eaten alive. On the other side, if I put all my money in for a 20-year product and put no money in for tomorrow, I'm not going to have a business in 20 years to even create the next generation of products.
Mm-hmm.
So we really do, and it's a great debate because we have discussions between myself, my marketing colleagues, sales colleagues, of really figuring out where the balance, and you can imagine everybody comes in from their own perspective. So the guardrails are always, hey, I need to at least put a minimum amount that I will have a good business in 20 years to launch the next product or in 10 years to launch the next product. And then it's really all about the long-term view of the business that we have and how we balance that. Because one thing I always tell folks is I support three businesses. The amount percentage of money I spend for long-term investment for each one is different
Mm.
because their markets are different, their customer base is different, and we balance it based on what their needs are. So for somebody, the way I always translate it is, hey, if you think this business is going to be around 100 years, you better be spending money today to make sure it's around in 100 years and put in a dedicated effort around that. If you
Mm.
have a really good business today and for whatever it is, you think it might peter out in 30, 40 years, or in normal people's terms, right? Maybe in 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to spend a hell of a lot less money for what I'm going to be doing in 3 to 4 years versus making sure I'm eking out every last dollar I can today. Because no matter how good I am in 3 to 4 years, I'm going to lock up shop soon after. And so the concept of understanding your long-term plan to help inform the short term is how we have these discussions.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason we have it across our teams is because, sales tends to think a little shorter term,
I was gonna say, right?
right? And so but you want that because if you let technology and marketing view it all, you may not think shorter term enough,
Right. Which
and
I'm
you're
saying the
not going
flip
to be
side, like you said, you got
successful.
to know, like, is this a business that's going to be around in a long time? Then you'd be
Yeah,
doing things. The flip side is that, like, you need to know, well, how much revenue do we need to bring in the next month, quarter, year? Like,
exactly.
because there's a minimum there. Like, you gotta, and obviously you want a buffer. So let's talk about that a little bit because well,
And,
I'm sure there's some. Not everyone listening is going to be making corporate decisions for a fortune, whatever. Like I don't know, what are you, Fortune 100, Fortune 10? I don't know what ExxonMobil is these days, but a very very large corporation, right? You're not going to make these large global
to
decisions.
be fair, I'm only in charge of a small portion of that large corporation.
True,
So
but still, and so that it's good having that balance. But like I was shared a little bit. I didn't want to go too far into it before. But I literally was having this conversation with myself this morning, and I haven't like used Chat GPT for brainstorming because it's like my personal business coach at times. But it was the same thing. Like I have this giant. I'm a solopreneur. I got one man shop. I got a giant list of to dos. Some are things I have to get done for upcoming gigs. Some are projects. that'll pay off maybe in 6 months, maybe in a year. But then you're not gonna make money this month. And so it's like I always get into one frame or the other. Like, all right, let me just do the stuff that's gonna make me money now. Let me focus on the really urgent. But then this itch starts in the back of my brain after like a few weeks. Where I'm like, oh my God, you haven't done any of. But then when I focus on the long term stuff, the short term stuff sort of falls by the wayside, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh man, I haven't booked anything this month, so I'm gonna not gonna have any money 3 months from now. Um, so how would you kind of advise? You obviously do this on a larger scale, but like, how do you talk about guide rails and stuff? Like, how do you find that balance to like? Because you kind of have to do both. It's not one or the other. It's not like we're only going to focus. So how do you find that balance in what you do, and how can maybe an individual use that?
Yeah, so I I'll be honest, I'm really bad at actually focusing my own time in the right way consistently.
Hmm.
I've tried every technique under the sun. I've done it scheduling 3 hours every Friday to only focus on the strategic long term stuff. I actually do it much better when I plan for the corporation than when I do it with my own time.
Sure.
I do think that there's certain things that I have found as a way to link the two. Um, First of all, I always start my weeks doing the things I enjoy the most. So I
Hmm.
actually will put some time on my calendar to do the things I enjoy the most at the beginning of the week. It may not be half a day or even 3 hours, but it'll always be an hour. Um,
Hmm.
I actually, so, and for me, believe it or not, it's not even short versus long term. I am motivated by people. So I will put time on my calendar Monday, Tuesday to do people related items. That gets me motivated. And then the stuff that I know I have to do and I like the least, I put on Wednesday. Sometimes Thursday, sometimes Tuesday. Never leave it to the end because it never gets done.
Yeah.
But whatever it is, right? So if I liked long term the least, I put the long term stuff in the middle of the week. If I like short term the least, I
Hmm.
put the short term stuff in the middle of the week. And guess what I do at the end of the week? I finish off with the things I enjoy again.
I love that. That is it's sort of this it's a philosophy I believe in, right? Like having fun and finding the fun in things. It's actually something I've been actively trying to currently work on in my own. Um, it's funny. I was in an earlier meeting where I said this. Like, I came to a point in my business where I'm like, as a speaker, you speak on stage for like an hour. That's like 5% of my time, and I realized I was spending 95% of my time doing stuff I don't really like at all. So the 5% of my time I could do what I love. So I've been trying to figure out how to add this joy, and I love this because the most literature around productivity and goal setting is about essentially discipline and the eat the frog metaphor from Mark Twain, which is like eat the frog first thing in the morning. If you got to eat a frog, do it first thing in the morning because then the rest of the day is great. And that never worked for me. It just
Nope.
starts my procrastination earlier. So I love this approach, which is like, no, start and end your week um, with what you enjoy because then that builds momentum. And then in the middle, you find that time. I love that. I'm going to try that because I haven't really thought about it specifically that way.
Because I always used to do the same thing. Do what you hate them first because then you'll enjoy the rest. I never got to do what I enjoyed because I could never start what I hated. So the way I started doing this, it was based on on literature and a course I took on giving feedback to individuals,
Hmm.
which I still don't fully believe in, but it tends to work. Um, it's hey, if you're going to give constructive feedback to people, don't just go in and give them constructive feedback. Start with what they're doing well.
Yeah.
Then in the middle, the sandwich,
Yeah.
give the constructive feedback, and then end with what they're and then end with what else they're doing well.
Hmm.
Actually, I never liked that recommendation for feedback, so I actually don't use it.
Yeah.
But I realized it was really good for how I do work during the week. And like I said, I don't do it for everything, but I schedule at least a little time in those sessions to hit on these key elements. And as I'm telling you this, I realize that everybody in my company can see my calendar. And so if I have one on ones with individuals, they're going to assume that I like the people on Mondays and Fridays and hate the Wednesday people.
Well, if any ExxonMobil people are listening to this, realize that sometimes scheduling goes beyond. It's like
So,
Alex is not
exactly.
intentionally putting you on Wednesday. Like,
Yep.
Director Bolkhovsky's got me on a Wednesday meeting. It's like, all right. We can edit that out too, but I think we'll leave it
It's
in.
okay.
Let you
It's
sweat a
okay.
little bit.
I'm all good.
Uh, no, I love that. That is a great tip, and I'm gonna try that because I'm trying to figure out how to get more real fun into my because I have total control. Like, and this is about me again, but like I'm a one man shop, which is hard and overwhelming. But at the same time, I have total control and choice over what I do and when I do it. And I still find myself putting things on my calendar. I'm like, ugh, like, or doing that first thing. Like I get up early. I'm usually up by like 5 ish, so I can get some stuff done before the kids get up. And yeah, it's like I put the thing on the calendar, like, oh, I got to get this done. And it's like sometimes I wake up and I look at this computer. I'm like, man, I don't want to do this. And I surf the net for like an hour instead.
But by the way, I told you and I are the same that way. Like if I force myself to do something I really don't want to do, I sort of have to trick myself into doing it
Mm-hmm.
because I don't unfortunately share the good self control to just go down, get into it and finish it. I will find a way to do something else, which generally isn't very productive. It's
It's
the
so I'm working on a whole thing. This probably this is like a long term thing, right? It's probably more like I don't know 3 to 12 months down the road, and it's more of like a one on one like B2C type option, right? Where I want to coach people essentially to help them with some of the things I've struggled with. And what I realized, my whole approach is I want to I want to help people who they've been in the space for a while, they've tried everything, but they can't get themselves to do what they want to do, and everything they learn is about discipline. And so they read the programs by the Navy SEALs and the military guys and the Olympians who are like,
Yep.
if you want it bad enough, you just wake up in the morning and do it. And I'm like, that's great. And a large percent of the population will respond to that. But then there are these people over here like me who just like, you know what? That has never worked for me. And when I trace everything I've been quote unquote successful at, it had like three common elements, which we didn't get too far, but it's like I found it fun to do. Um, Usually I'm doing with people I like, and there was some kind of short-term feedback, like a show or like a karate test or something like reward. I'm like, oh, that's not discipline, that's the fun, that's the enjoyment, and that. But I always felt guilty about that approach because everything I read about is like it's not about fun, it's about discipline. So, and frankly, I never would have guessed that about you because, for all the years when we knew each other, you seemed very disciplined with the workouts, and work, and you were very dedicated to work. So that's fascinating to know that behind the scenes, inside that beautiful bald head of yours, that you are, just as flawed as the rest of us.
Oh, dude, I'm more flawed than the rest of you. But because even in workouts, I would find a motivator to get me to that gym that I enjoyed so that I could do the workout, some of which I enjoyed more than others. Unlike you, I never enjoyed legs, if you can remember.
Oh yeah, I
So,
remember that.
so like even when I did legs, I would find some treat ahead of the leg workout for me, whether it was a quick curl or something else to get there. But I will tell you, I mean, part of my issue is I've read all sorts of self help books on everything. None of them work for me. But one thing I always found is if I got creative and I applied a concept for help in one area, I actually would be able to use it in another area and make it successful for me.
Oh
So that's why I said in this situation, the way I choose how I do my work is actually based on a principle of giving feedback to people.
yeah, and that kind of comes to the cross discipline, the learning
Yep.
different things. Because yeah, some of my best stuff that I learned both that I teach in improv and that I apply to myself is not stuff I learned from like a self help book or a productivity book. But um, no, that's fascinating because I was kind of in the same boat. Like I have read every productivity book under the sun, every goal setting book under the sun, and so many of them don't work. But it's when I kind of apply some of these types of things. So yeah, you and I will probably have another conversation about this thing, whether it's on a recorded podcast or just a conversation. We'll talk more about that. But I will say with the fun, as I said, I've had total control of my schedule. It's a little harder now, got kids and things like that.
Mhm.
But back when I was single, no girlfriend, no kids, total control over my schedule, I could not get myself to the gym consistently, even though I had total control. The most consistent I ever made it to the gym was when you, me, and our other buddy Mike lived in the same apartment complex, and
Yep.
we just started going before work. We got up extra early. We'd stop at the gym on the way to work. So it's ridiculous. My schedule was way more busy. We're going at this incredibly inconvenient time. I was not naturally waking up at 5 a.m. at that time. I had to wake an alarm, but it was the most consistent. Number one, because there was accountability, because you two were going as well.
That's
But more
right.
importantly, because it was like, hey, before work, I get to hang out with my two buddies, and it was
Yep.
fun. Um, so yeah, it goes all the way back to then, just making it fun. Just
Making it fun. And that's right. The accountability is a big thing, but honestly, if I didn't like you, I didn't care. I wouldn't have cared about my accountability or your accountability to me. The fact is, exactly, we got to see each other like what, 3, 4 days a week.
yeah, just in the morning. Yeah,
In the morning. Absolutely.
yeah, it was all right. So that's great because that one of my I talk a lot about the improviser's mindset, which is anyone can do improv. For me, it's really more about the mindset than the skills. The skills come if you got the mindset. And one of the three components of mindset is have fun. Like if you are having fun, it improves performance. It makes you more willing to take risks. It opens up your creativity. And it clearly makes you more motivated to do stuff. So, all right, that is fantastic. I did want to talk about one more thing before we wrap up.
Mhm.
We kind of went on a bunch of tangents here, but I want to come back because obviously, and one of the things I talk about the most is change. So I think people are interested in that. And you had mentioned, um, because I talk to groups, I talk to companies that are internally changing, they're reorganizing, or they've grown rapidly, and suddenly we're shifting. And you actually led an initiative recently about a reorganization.
Yep.
So I'd love to just hear a little bit about kind of what that was about and sort of what your experience was, kind of lessons learned, both good, like what worked, and maybe kind of what some of the struggles were in leading a team or a department through a reorganization or
Yeah,
division.
no, absolutely. I mean, it was we actually, I think, yeah, we implemented it a little over a year ago. It was an opportunity for us where we talk about connecting the dots. Sometimes you connect dots outside of groups. We actually looked across two of the groups we had in our organization, and we thought that there was an opportunity to actually sort of merge them.
Hmm.
But as we got into the study, we realized that so it was two teams of about 80 each that we brought together. But then
Let
we
me
also
pause you real quick because I'm going to forget otherwise. So you mentioned when we got into the study. So what
yeah.
what what do you mean by that?
Oh, so I mean, part of the things that we get involved with is, I mean, with different perspectives. I had looked, and a couple of us had always said, we think there's an opportunity to combine two of our groups and maybe reshuffle a few other areas so that people that work in similar types of technology areas actually work closer together.
Hmm.
And so we looked at what we thought was really more of a was value across the board. Well, one, we thought there was an opportunity because we were all reasonably small groups that if you brought critical mass in, you could be a little more flexible of
Hmm.
who you put on which project. We thought we were going to give people an opportunity to learn broader areas and honestly make themselves more valuable to the company, gain deeper expertise, and actually be more resilient if our business is changed. So it was, I mean, a lot of these things come semi organically where a few of us that had worked across the company said, hey, there's something here.
Hmm.
So for me, anytime you do a change, there's a couple of things. One is once you start identifying the idea, you need to make sure there's enough people bought in
Yep.
that you have critical mass to study it more, right? Because the concept is our change ended up involving about 150 to 200 people, modifying like people went to like 6 different groups across the company. We merged two, but then we sent them to 4 others with the whole concept of we wanted to be flexible, we wanted to deepen people's expertise, and we wanted to be more effective, right?
Hmm.
So just because we identified something didn't mean we knew how to actually implement it. So one of the early things about doing this, and actually we had identified this potential a year before, but we pitched the idea and we had a lot of other changes going on in the corporation and our leadership was interested but wouldn't prioritize it.
Hmm.
So at this point, a year later, we said, hey, we actually knew that there was a bit of a push to look at new things like this. So we brought it in and we put a team together, small team, so to study what the as is was and recommend the best to be.
Hmm.
And the things that worked for us is having a team look at it brought a lot of great different perspectives. We not only included people that were already within these teams, but we specifically looked outside of these teams to bring in a team, folks that had a different perspective, had
Hmm.
experiences with other changes, or had just really way outside of the box type of ideas. And we formed a really small team. It was about 6 people, five
Hmm.
people. So it wasn't dozens of people. It was a small team because we needed them to work. They involved others, but they were a small core team.
Right.
So the things that worked is I knew this from before that if you put in 10 or 12 people, 4 or 5 people do all the work anyways,
Yeah.
and the others just slow them down. So we put in 5 or 6, I think in this case it was 6, really high performers who we knew would act. And we let them figure out if they needed to bring in other people for ideas, but we let them go and act and put a recommendation.
And
So
so
that was
how did they study it? Did they like go and interview people and talk to people and like what is kind of some of the way they research before making their recommendations?
Yeah, so they interviewed folks. They looked at the organizations we had, the work we were doing. They had part of the value is by bringing in a small group of disparate experiences, they actually knew a lot of the company.
Yeah.
And so they actually had their own experiences that they were able to bring in. And as you would imagine, we're a big technology based organization, and have a lot of scientists and engineers. They mapped out what everybody did, what type of things they did, about how much time they spent. They
Wow.
looked at where people had similar engagements with customers, where they had similar technologies through a combination of interviews, and as well as their knowledge base.
All
And
right, and
so
so then once you decided to move forward with it, how did you kind of roll that out? Were people resistant to it? Did they were like, oh, this is gonna be great, or
so again, this a lot of the things we do, and yes, there's some best practices out there that of course we follow, but a lot of these things I've had experiences. And one of my previous experiences is no matter how brilliant an idea that you have, if you just spring it on people, there are not many that are going to enjoy it. And you always think your idea is more brilliant than it really is.
mm-hmm.
So we actually, in this particular situation, of course, we had typical management reviews, but we actually, as we were progressing the study, we brought in our entire organization and shared with them where we were.
Mm-hmm.
We shared with them what we had studied. We shared our preliminary ideas. We took feedback and we said, hey, before we get to the next step, we will share more. So by the time we had rolled it out, and we did it in a pretty compressed timeline, I think from the start of the study till rolling it out was about 3 months.
Okay.
So we didn't drag it on for a long time. But by the time we had rolled it out, they all pretty much knew what it was. They shared their biggest concerns already. And
So real quick, when you say you communicated with the entire organization, you mean the entire organization as in the entire group of people you were merging, or you mean like the entire larger ExxonMobil organization?
So we essentially shared it with the entire 150 people that were directly impacted,
Hmm.
as well as with the another couple of hundred people that were indirectly impacted.
Okay, gotcha. So
Um,
again, coming back to what we talked before, communication, right? Transparency,
Communication,
communicating with everyone. Here's what we learned. Here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it.
yeah. But it's not just communication, right? Communication is important, has a huge impact. Giving people the again, it goes back to another theme we talked about. We have more control than we think.
Hmm.
Most people think they have less control than they do. So giving people some sense of control, the ability just to even input
Yeah.
ahead of the rollout, or even when they're only complaining or sharing their concerns, hearing them out and trying to address them or identifying that that's something you'll address through the way you roll out goes a long, long way. This was actually the most transparent I'd ever been, and I've been part of or led probably 4 or 5 reorgs in my career. This was the first time I went that transparent. But I figured I'd learn if nothing else.
Hmm.
But it made the implementation a heck of a lot easier. You're never going to get everybody on board,
Sure.
but I would say we had a very small number of detractors initially, and we actually had mostly people that once they learned about it, once we rolled it out, and of course we kept communicating. We communicated as we rolled it out. We communicated not only why we were doing it for the corporation, but why we were doing it for the people,
Hmm.
and had an integrated message of, hey, here's what's in it for you. Here's why we think it's important for everyone and for the organization. And we also said, we're going to listen to you as we go. We know we're not perfect. So as we rolled it out, we had two benefits associated with that. One is that people were actually willing, when they saw things that weren't working, to help fix them, not even forcing us to go fix them, but we absolutely knew we were going to get honest feedback.
Hmm.
And we have over the 12 plus months since we've done it. We've run multiple surveys and we keep getting better. But we also admitted when we rolled it out, we're not going to be perfect. We did
Yep.
this in 3 months. We said the value of being perfect versus the extra time it would take to get there isn't there. So bear with us. Make sure you feed back, and we'll make improvements as we go. And that's the other piece. It's not just communicating; it's actually making sure that you're doing what you said you'd do. It's having the credibility that we said we'll listen and we'll improve.
Hmm.
And not only, and so now as we get that feedback, we're sharing very transparently what we're doing to improve and make it better.
Yeah, that's great. That's that iterative approach, right? That take a step, see what
Yep.
happens, adjust, do it again, um, versus spending months or years before you take the first step. All right, well that's great, and I got a lot of mental notes there. So, and a
But
lot
yeah,
of things to learn there. Whether you're doing a reorganization, with 150 people within a large
or
corporation, or just
yeah,
a small change, you got a team of like five.
or
You
no
see it
matter.
all the time, though, that the leader slash manager gets an idea, and they're like, "Boom, this is what we're gonna do now." And I'm guilty of this, right? Back when I ran an
Obviously,
improv group, I'd come in and be like, "All right, here's what we're gonna do now." Again, kind of like you said in a different story, like I was in my, early 20s, mid 20s. Now I'd be much more like, here's something I'm thinking of. What are your thoughts? And how can we make this better and get that
yeah.
involvement, get that feedback, get that input? It's so obvious in retrospect. But
Yeah,
it's like,
it is. Yeah, I mean, the things you learn is, yeah, have people feel part of the process instead of being the output of whatever the
yeah.
change process is, right? It's showing that transparency and credibility that if you're telling them you're going to do something, do it. And if you can't do it, admit that you didn't do it. So when we learned about things that were broken, we would go out there, and I would go out there in calls and admit, hey, yeah, we didn't see this well, we'll
Hmm.
fix it, right? And then of course the other piece is, for me, it's you can work on things forever to make them better. At some point and as early as possible, just go do,
Yep.
learn, make better. And in many cases, you can actually just go back to where you were originally. And if you always have the option to go back to where you started from, in our case, it was probably a little too much of a change to go back. But one of the things I find amazing with people like, oh, I'm scared to do this. And I ask them, I'm like, well, if it messes up, can you just go back to where you were yesterday? Yeah. Well, why don't you try? Because the worst case thing is you
Yep.
screw up a little, but you just go back to where you were the day before.
It is amazing how validating I'm finding this conversation. Because literally in my keynote, I say that. Say that step into uncertainty, let go of your plan, see what happens. And I'm like, it's not set in stone though. You can always decide, hey, I explored this, I didn't like it. I'm gonna go back. The old plan was better. Let me go back to the old way.
Yep.
And it's so great. I mean, it's amazing how you're using it and how you've applied this, but it's like, yeah, that's um it's so simple, but it's so easy because people get defensive, they get scared, they're worried about what other people think about them, and they don't want to take the step. And well, Alex, this was fantastic. We would probably keep talking, but it's getting late. I'm
Yep,
on the East Coast.
I
I
get
don't
it.
want to keep you any longer. This is so normally, I've had a lot of people on who are like speakers or consultants, and you know, they want to promote something or they have a book, and I don't know if why you're on here other than because you want to have a conversation with me, which is great. So, but if people want to connect with you, if you're open to it, any is there anyone particular looking to connect with, or any manner in which people could reach out to you and be like, "Oh, I like what he had to say, and I'd like to learn more about him."
So I am on LinkedIn, and I actually am semi-active. And yeah, the only reason I'm on here is because I love you. So
I
that's
appreciate that.
you may want to edit that out, but
No way,
that's
that's the
why I'm
best
on
part of
here.
this.
But yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. If people want to connect, I'm always willing to connect. One of the biggest enjoyments I have is actually talking from people outside of ExxonMobil as well. I love the people I work with, but I learn as much, if not more, from those outside of where I work. So happy to connect with anybody.
Well, fantastic. I got one more question for you before we finish up. But yeah, as a reminder, if you we'll post we'll post a link to your LinkedIn in the show notes, and want to connect with Alex, reach out to him, tell him how much you loved his appearance on this podcast. Obviously, you're not a speaker or consultant, but you got a lot of great ideas. So if anyone wants to chat and learn more, it sounds like you're doing a lot of things right over there. Maybe not all the time. Maybe you forget like the rest of us do, but overall, you got the right approach and the right idea. So Alex, I'm gonna finish this interview up with the way I try to finish most of these. Simple question. So I talk about the idea of saying yes and instead of yes, but one of the reasons I do that is because I honestly believe the world would be a better place if everyone just simply started with the default of yes and when they're approaching life and other people. So what is one small thing that you believe if everyone just did this one little thing or did this one little thing differently, it would make the world a better place? What would you say that would be?
Mine is assume positive intent.
Hmm.
We tend to always look at the hidden motives of what people do, and half the time it takes us down a rabbit hole of creating scenarios that don't actually occur. The amount of times I run into people that are like, "Hey, I wonder why this person asked me this. Are they trying to steal my project, or are they looking to do something else?" Where if you assume positive intent, it actually creates much better opportunities. It's absolutely amazing. It's hard sometimes, but at least in the workplace for me, it should be easier. Because if you're not working with people you trust that you can assume positive intent with, you're
Hmm.
probably at the wrong place.
Yeah, I love that. And kind of goes back to one of my favorite quotes, which I started working on an article, couldn't quite figure out maybe I can come back to it, but it's just, um, never attribute to malice what can be attributed to stupidity or incompetence. It's like so often we think someone's doing something intentionally to hurt us, but it's like, no, they just didn't know any better, or no, they were just incompetent, they just messed it up. It's
I love it. I love it.
awesome. Well, Alex, thank you. This was fantastic. I had a great conversation. Love catching up with you and learning from you, and in fact, learning things about you personally. I even after 30 years, I didn't know, so that's fantastic.
Yeah, thanks, Avisha. I enjoyed it too. I'll find any excuse to chat with you. So this is as great as any other.
Awesome. Well, we will do it again.
Awesome.